I think we're ready to reconvene. Thank you. It's my pleasure to reintroduce to you the Bishop Chair of our board, Bishop Blaise Zupich, who has a few words and an announcement to make. Bishop.
Good morning again. As you know, Karen is completing her term as president of NCEA, which we had an opportunity to celebrate yesterday with gratitude. And there was a search committee organized to try to find a new president, and I can tell you that they worked very hard. It was something that the board took seriously. And that's why today I'm pleased to announce that Brother Robert Mamonte is the new president of NCEA. You know him well. He has been a part of this wonderful organization, and the fact that someone came from internally is a testimony to the high quality of people who serve in various ways the NCEA. And so as we congratulate you, Brother Robert, today, we want to also celebrate the wonderful staff that you have that will continue the great work that Karen has begun and handed on to you. Thank you. Congratulations.
It's hard for me to believe, and it's even harder for me to admit, that it was some 30+ years ago that I attended my very first NCEA convention. But I clearly remember walking into a large auditorium, just like this, and feeling awed and overwhelmed that I was surrounded by thousands of Catholic educators, just like me. People from all over the country who were doing what I was doing, but more importantly, who believed in what they were doing. And whether sitting there or standing here some 30 years later, it's the same amazing feeling to be in the presence of thousands of dedicated Catholic educators. I want to thank Bishop Zupich, the search committee, and the NCEA Board of Directors for the trust they have placed in me. I do want to thank the incredible staff of NCEA that I have had the privilege of working with for the past 10 years. And I especially want to thank Karen Risto for her outstanding leadership these past 8 years. Karen, you've taught me so much as a leader, a mentor, and most importantly, a friend. You leave us an amazing legacy, and you will be sorely missed. Most importantly, I want to thank each and every one of you for all that you do each day. Each day, you touch the hearts and minds of your students. Each day, you are doing the work of God. Thank you for all that you do, but most importantly, thank you for all that you are.
Thank you, Brother Robert. You know, in your life, you have so many transitions, and you worry about some, and there are others you just don't worry about. And this transition to my retirement and Brother Robert being the new president is a wonderful transition. and it's going to work very well, and I am so happy that Brother Robert will be our new president. And let me take a moment now to introduce to you Dr. Regina Haney, who is the Executive Director of the Boards and Commissions Department of NCEA, who will introduce our speaker. Regina?
Good morning. I should say good morning, y'all. Kavina has been tutoring me. This morning's session is Reinvigorating Catholic Identity in a Digital Age. Our speaker over the year has been all about reinvigoration. Again and again, she has brought fresh ideas, new perspectives, and energy to Catholic education through the integration of technology with faith formation. Sister Angela and I go way back. I first became aware of her involvement in her ministry through an article in Momentum, NCEA's journal. She was pictured with a TV and a telephone. Now, the caption said something like, "Sister introduces a new way to present adult religious education." Now, I know Sister doesn't go back to the telephone, the first telephone, but she was trying to emphasize that this was a new way at looking at how we can use technology, and the technology at that time was the telephone and cable TV. So this was a way to reach folks at that time. Later on, in the 1990s, I had a chance to team up with Angela Ann in the program called New Frontiers for Catholic Schools, a way to reimagine, reinvigorate Catholic schools as they prepared for the technological advances shaping education. Each year, for 10 years, these programs brought Catholic school teams together to explore new ways to envision and plan for the future. Angela Ann and I laugh out loud, LOL, every time we think that we had one computer for all 30 participants, and we thought that was great. This past January, I attended her convocation for the virtual learning community for faith formation, the VLCFF. Sister holds this every year at the University of Dayton. And here I was reminded of Angela Ann's dream of a distance learning project that she spoke about many times in the early 1990s. This dream certainly exceeded her expectation. Back in 1999, the VLCFF had one diocese participating, and she was offering one online course. Today, the VLCFF annually serves 7,000 students worldwide, nationwide in the United States, around several countries, in 175 dioceses. And now she offers 135 e-courses. Over these years, Angela Ann continues to be the pioneer in online faith formation and innovative online learning. Her ultimate goal, as our ultimate goal, should be to reach out and to lead folks into a relationship with Jesus Christ and his church that in turn leads folks to go forth and evangelize. Given Sister's long involvement in technology that has taken various forms over the decades, we are fortunate to have her help us look at Catholic identity through the lens of technology today, the digital age. Angela Ann is the recipient of many national and international awards for her contributions to church communications, her contributions toward the advancement of technology, and her contributions to adult faith formation. These are a few of her awards. She received the Pro Ecclesia Medal from Pope John Paul II in Rome, the Honorary Prize of Julian Calenti during the National Catholic Film Association Conference held in Warsaw, Poland, and awards from the Religious Education Department and the Boards and Councils Department of NCEA. Of her many publications, the one that relates to our experience today as we get ready to meet an outstanding woman in Catholic communications is her book, Voices of Courage. This is an international profile of women in Catholic communications, which, by the way, has been translated into several languages. Please help me welcome Sister Angela Ann Zukowski, a visionary, a get-it-done kind of person, and a strong advocate of Catholic identification for both schools and catechetical programs. Sister Angela Ann.
Good job, kiddo. Good job. Good morning, all of you saints from the east and the west and the north and the south. Good morning. That is how St. Paul would greet you, to all of you saints. And Pope John Paul II wrote this beautiful letter to artists, which I use in my classes all the time. And although he's speaking to artists, he also says he is speaking to everyone, because we're all artists in our life. And in that, he speaks about all of us have that spark of the divine in us, and all of us are called to create a masterpiece of our life. And in that sense, we all have that spark of the divine. We are all aflame with the movement of the Holy Spirit in our lives. And if you're looking for a saint, reach out and touch the person next to you. There is a first-class relic. Now, I don't mean relic in age, but there definitely is a first-class relic. Wonderful. Now, we understand we all are aflame with the Holy Spirit. Yesterday, I was sitting on this side of the hall, and I just looked out over all of you, and just felt all this energy. And I had this wow experience. In January, I was in the Vicariate of Southern Arabia, because they are one of our partners with us, giving some talks and working with the Archbishop there. And one of the parishes in Dubai has 250,000 parishioners. Their catechetical program on the weekend, which would be Friday and Saturday, has 6,000 students. And they have 450 volunteer catechists on the weekend. I looked out over this Mass, and I thought, we have a few more than 6,000, but if I were appointed the DRE of 6,000 young people, and this is it, where would you begin? But what I discovered in the Vicariate of the Southern Vicariate of Arabia was the beautiful animation of the lay people, because who keeps the church alive in that part of the world? And in case geographically you're trying to imagine it, think about where Arabia is on the map, Saudi Arabia, and go all the way to the bottom, and you see Qatar, and you see Dubai and Abu Dhabi, Oman and Yemen, and the faith in that part of the world, in this Muslim world, is very robust and very animated. And it's the lay people who hold those churches together and move forward. And on Easter Sunday, I received a message from a friend of mine in Abu Dhabi, and their Easter vigil had 30,000 people. Imagine distributing communion to 30,000. Our talk here is all about looking at Catholic identity in a digital age. And what I'm hoping I can do is sort of bring together some of the areas that are of concern for myself and also are animating me and challenging me to explore the question of where should we be now? What should we be thinking about? What should we be discussing in this new age of this digital age of culture? First of all, the title says age, but if there's anything I would like you to leave with, there's many things I hope I will leave with you, but it's more than an age. I talk about more than the tools of technology. It's more than an age, and my friends, it's more than a culture now. We are talking about a new civilization. It's much deeper, it's much broader. I am not the one who coined that. It was Pope Benedict XVI who coined it and said it's a civilization, and we cannot take this lightly. We are either informed or we form this new culture. And it is our role as Catholic educators, as catechists, as seminary professors, as those who work on school boards, to keep that in mind, that it's more than tools. We're talking about a civilization. So there are some points that I'm going to weave in and out as we go forward for you to keep in mind. First of all, I want you to keep in mind that we're talking about an emerging digital milieu. We need to be very much aware of the new brain research that's going on and how it's impacting learning and teaching. We need to recognize that there are new learning styles, a rethinking of the sense of learning place. Our place is shifting. We no longer just think about a place like a classroom or a parish. The place has changed, is shifting. And we want to talk about a living faith in a digital world. A living faith. A living faith. And finally, folks, we need to think outside the box. In Evangelii Nuntiandi, we hear those beautiful words that there is this hidden energy of the good news, a hidden energy. Now, this isn't passive energy, it's hidden energy. And our role is to release that energy. And with that spark of the divine that is within each one of us, we can set the world afire. We can be those instruments by which the good news is truly proclaimed. It's very appropriate that we talk about the Emmaus story in this presentation, because it's directly related to what I want to share with you. Because the Emmaus story is all about having an encounter with the person of Jesus and then going out and witness. Having an encounter with Jesus, personally meeting Jesus, not simply knowing about Jesus, but knowing Jesus. And once knowing Jesus, it's witnessing to Jesus. And so we heard the story this morning in the scriptures of the disciples on the way from Jerusalem to Emmaus, encountering Jesus, not recognizing who he was, so often like people today who may not recognize in the experience of Jesus. But something happened to them as Jesus spoke. Their hearts were burning, and as their hearts were burning, they were being awakened. And what do? They invite Jesus in, and it was in the breaking of the bread that they recognized who Jesus was. And in the breaking of the bread, and in that recognition, for me, it wasn't that he just disappeared. I think Jesus became bone of their bone and flesh of their flesh. They recognized him. They allowed him to become part of them. And they just didn't stand there and say, wasn't this a nice experience we had? But they went out to witness. They went out on mission. Because you cannot stand still if you have encountered the Lord Jesus Christ. It's impossible to stand still. You have to be in fire with that, and flame with that. And so the Emmaus story links in very well with why we are involved in this new digital civilization, because this is the new missionary territory of the 21st century. And you and I have a responsibility as catechists, as Catholic school educators, as administrators, as priests, as bishops, as people who serve on boards, to become so acquainted with this that we know how to position the good news in this civilization. Our hearts need to be burning. But part of what our role and responsibility is to cultivate the religious imagination so that those who are around us can also recognize the experience that is placed before them. Religious imagination. It doesn't take much for us, in a sense, these weeks to think about what religious imagination is for us, because we've just completed Holy Week, the Triduum, and the Easter Vigil, which was so beautiful, isn't it? I mean, I just love this time of the year, and fortunately, I experienced the Easter Vigil in one of the local parishes, Christ the Redeemer. I don't know if anyone is here from yet. I just want to say that was a beautiful liturgy, and I'm a tough one to be in your audience when it comes to liturgies. It was top-notch liturgy. But all of religious imagination comes out if we really appreciate and understand what is going on during the Triduum and Easter week and Easter Vigil. Andrew Greeley wrote a book one time. It was called The Catholic Imagination. And in case we're wondering what we mean by religious imagination, he says, as Catholics, we find our places haunted by a sense of objects, events, and persons of daily life which are revelations of grace. All around us are revelations of grace. Religious imagination means being able to see those moments, to see those revelations of grace around us, to capture the great mystery, the great beauty of God in our life. This special Catholic imagination appropriately is often referred to as sacramentals. So how do we look around our world every day and see and observe the working of God and praise God for it, even in those dark moments, because our God is a living God. And we need to be aware of that and conscious of this awareness of this living God. Religious imagination. If again you're not exactly sure what I mean by religious imagination, let's just go back about a month and a half, and there's another religious imagination. Imagine the whole world in this high digital civilization is watching a chimney. You turn on TV, and if you don't have it full blown, you see it off to the side of your screen, waiting to see whether it's black smoke or white smoke. In our office, we were waiting for all of this to happen eagerly on a huge screen. We really didn't think it was going to happen on the day it did, and one of the staff came out and said, "It's smoke, it's smoke!" And we thought the house was burning down. Religious imagination. But our religious imagination of the chimney also took on a digital dimension. Because in no time, there was the Sistine seagull, which you could Twitter it. And you do know that this seagull had 9,000 followers. It doesn't take much with religious imagination. I'm not even talking about the lightning that seemed to be above the St. Peter's. But religious imagination has been capturing us at every day since our Pope Francis has come into our midst and been stimulating our religious imagination. In no time, stories were already evolving of his working at going out and picking up children and washing feet and celebrating the Eucharist, and his very presence has stimulated our religious imagination. It didn't take much time before we began to realize, as a matter of fact, once they recognized who this was who was elected the next pope, within a short matter of minutes, there were 130,000 tweets per minute emerging on the Pope. Within less than 12 hours, there were 500 million references to him on Google. And within 24 hours, we already had 10 facts about our Holy Father, Pope Francis. So if you think you can hide in this cyber world, forget it. The information is all out there. Further, what happens along is if any of you were watching CNN, we know that CNN created a virtual conclave for us before the conclave began, during the conclave, and even after the conclave. We were invited to go in and to go visit the different rooms and virtually experience what was or what would be happening. The digital world further took our imagination, because if you wanted to talk with anyone who was there in the conclave, not in the conclave, but in Rome, observing what was happening, you could easily go to blogs, apps, YouTube, Twitter, or more, and directly communicate with any one of these famous people. But it didn't take long either for our Holy Father, Pope Francis, to also begin his tweets. And soon we had those tweets merging up. 2 years ago, Pope Benedict XVI decided that on this past Holy Saturday, the Holy Saturday icon of the Holy Shroud would be open for public viewing. And that what would happen, you would be able to download an app whereby you could virtually go to Turin and you could also visit and also see what was happening. The power of the digital technology also to stimulate our religious imagination. All of these are part of who we are and where we are going, and it's all around us. But many of us may feel that, let's face it, we feel like we are experiencing the Rip Van Winkle syndrome. Now, in case you wonder what the Rip Van Winkle syndrome is, it means, don't you feel that one day you woke up and someone changed the world and didn't ask you? Remember rotary phones? Maybe some of you still have them. How many of you ever had party lines on rotary phones? Yeah, we had party lines. There were 4 families connected to our phone, and according to the rings, you knew which family the phone was for. But you know, there was always someone in the neighborhood who picked up the phone all the time. And passed on to the rest of the neighborhood what was happening. So that was the beginning of social networking. So for all of you who say, I don't understand social networking, you just tell your grandchildren you were the pioneer of social. Remember the Gestetner and the mimeographs? We used to smell it, to feel this. Yeah. You're laughing so hard, I know what age you are. Remember blackboards? And we still have blackboards. Huh. All the technology has been shifting. Rip Van Winkle syndrome. Woke up one morning and just when you think that you just bought the latest technology, they tell you the new one's out. So there's the history of the evolution of communications. You can decide where you fit in. First written word, movable type, mass publication, email, Twitter, 140 characters. What more is there to say? So we see this new world we're living in. Then to add to our Rip Van Winkle syndrome, somebody starts talking about a cloud. And then they tell us, what's beautiful is that we don't need all this technology to save everything in our offices, in our homes, in our classrooms. But now we can put it all up in the cloud. We don't know where it is. We can put it up in the cloud, and no matter where you go in the world, you can access the cloud. Well, for those of you who still wonder what the cloud is all about, don't you love it? But amidst all of this, and this is one of my concerns, we are immersed in a culture of distraction. There's lack of time to really quiet down, for silence, and to hear the inner voice, and to hear God in our life. In this digital civilization, I believe catechists, Catholic school teachers and administrators, and parish leaders, we need to call all our people to appreciate the importance of contemplation and silence. We need to listen to the voice of God. Now, some of you may be experiencing the vibration reflex syndrome. Now, this prevents us from cultivating a center for contemplation. Now, if any of you are wondering what I'm talking about, if you have any kind of a phone with you right now, you probably were all very good because you're good, great Catholics, and you turned off your phone. But you might have left the buzzer on. That's just in case someone more important than I is trying to reach you. The vibration reflex syndrome means that we always are on 24/7 to receive that most important message that is to come to us. Now, without a doubt, there are moments with families and sometimes within our ministry and our work where we need to have that vibration on. But do we really need to have it on 24/7? How do we listen to God? How do we come to contemplation? The vibration reflex syndrome means that if it's in your pocket and you've turned it off and it hasn't buzzed in the last 5 minutes, you think that somebody didn't get your message right. Even more so, it did not buzz and you thought it buzzed and you take it out. The vibration reflex syndrome. Okay. Karl Rahner, one of the great Catholic theologians of the 20th century, he spoke about, in the 60s, that we were entering into a wintry season of the church, a wintry season of faith. And he said what he perceived is that we were moving into a kind of an eclipse of mystery, an eclipse of God, eclipse of the great mystery, because of everything else that was evolving around us. Pope Benedict XVI spoke about placing God in a ghetto, only thinking about God on Sunday when we go to worship, when we're teaching a religion class, or when we're doing a particular activity. But it's not, the experience of God is not woven through our whole cultural experience. The eclipse of mystery is important for us to keep in mind. So in light of that, what is the contribution that Catholic education and catechesis makes to this new civilization, this new digital civilization? I believe that we need to consciously sit down and work together with our faculties and with our catechetical teams and with our parishes and with all of our ministries, thinking about how do we animate an encounter with Jesus, nurturing a living faith, not a dying faith. I'm tired of hearing all this spiraling down about the church. We are spiraling up. This is a living faith. And cultivating a sense of wonder and mystery in an age of technology and in science. And radical discipleship, that's praying the Our Father and meditating on the Beatitudes is a radical discipleship. Radical discipleship means it's rooted deeply within us. It's bone of our bone and flesh of our flesh. It means we encounter the Lord at Emmaus and we go and we witness, we leave because our hearts are burning. And that we form a community that is on fire, that all those who look and see and experience our community within any kind of range experiences who Jesus is. And that we are signs of hope because we have hope. We believe in our God. And fundamentally, that comes down to a line I want you also to remember, is that in this new digital civilization, as it evolves, I believe that a new Catholic theological anthropology needs to be named. Not that there's anything wrong with our current Catholic theological anthropology. Nothing that we have wrong about how we understand what it means to be human and how we live that out. But this digital civilization is impinging upon us new perspectives, dynamics, and a way of being and a way of living that we need to come to terms with. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Oh, okay. So I think the challenge for Catholic identity is that how do we live out, how do we prepare and nurture our young people to live in this radical new culture? How do we ooze Catholic identity into a virtual civilization, into a virtual world? There are more than one ways of putting our message out there. We definitely can speak of the new digital resources and technologies. They are the tools. They are the means. But it is only one means. Perhaps we can see the parable of the sower and the seed as one example of what it means to be cultivating this digital civilization. This is the place of our new missionary landscape. This digital civilization informs us, forms us, and transforms us with quantum speed. And if you would like to hear an example of what do we mean by this, just last week in the news, it gave us this information. Every 60 seconds on the internet, 60 seconds. Every 60 seconds on the internet, 204 million emails are sent. Amazon.com makes $83,000 per second. I think the church should invest in Amazon.com. 20 million photos are viewed on Flickr. 100,000 new tweets are published. 277,000 people log into Facebook. 2 million people do searches on Google. And 30 hours of video are uploaded to YouTube every 60 seconds. So, the projection is, now you're ready for this, by 2015, which is just around the corner, the number of devices connected to the internet is expected to reach twice that of the global population, and it will take you 5 years to watch all the video content that is shared across the internet in just a single second. That's awesome information. That's what we mean that becomes part of the culture also of distraction. In the 60s, there was a man, his name was Marshall McLuhan, and people thought that this was a prophet of doom. They had no idea what he was talking about, but he was prophetic because he said, we shape our technologies and our technologies shape us. What that means is that literally what will happen is that as we continue to nurture and design these new technologies, they shape our life, just like our iPhones, our smartphones are shaping how we work, how we play, how we connect with one another. This iGeneration, this is my nephew on the left. My brother and sister work for Hewlett-Packard here in Houston, Texas. This is what he looked like 10 years ago. He's all wired up. Recently, I went to visit some of the early childhood schools, Catholic schools. Those are some of the children in early childhood working on their lessons. And the lower picture is my niece of 3 months. She's teething on an iPad. This digital civilization is being designed by people 19 and younger. Mark Zuckerberg, we're familiar with Facebook, but just recently, Nick Delioso just sold his app. He was studying for exams, and he was doing all this research on the internet, and he didn't want to have to read all the articles. He wanted to find a quicker way to do that. So he designed an app that will reduce any article down to 140 characters. He designed it. He sold it for $30 million at the age of 17. These young people are designing this culture, and so we find ourselves running after this culture when we should be also participating in the formation of this culture. So this culture also calls us that we need 21st century fluencies, new skills that we need to develop, which means that our catechetical formation programs need to be rethought of how we prepare catechists to deal with our children, how we prepare our Catholic school teachers and administrators and boards to think about who we are and where we are going, because there are new learning spaces and places being designed every day. Our space is changing of where we learn. The digital civilization context is changed because its context is global. It's open, it's transparent, it's non-hierarchical, it's interactive, it's in real time, and it's changing all the time. I was recently asked, "Sister, why don't you write a book on all this?" Because I said, "Why should I write a book? By the time I finish the first chapter, the civilization has changed." But all of this impacts a new understanding of being human. That influences a new civilization that has emerged. So what do we look for? We need to be looking for the emerging of the digital milieu, brain research, et cetera, which I've shown before. So this new digital civilization offers us new opportunities. It offers us the opportunities of faith digital resources. Our libraries are shifting to e-libraries. My doctoral dissertation was on the use and application of telecommunications for small town and rural parishes. Part of my research was to work with dioceses and to work with parishes to create media libraries. Well, my dissertation is out of date because you can have your whole library right here. The emerging new learning ecologies are shifting our spaces and how we are learning. One of many examples that we could look at. But then, you have to solve the problem by yourself. You can't call tech. Our environments are changing because we're talking about flipping the classroom. What we do in the classroom traditionally is now being recommended that they design to do it at home. Creating videos, putting them up on the internet, having students be able to download those lectures and those presentations, and then when we come to class during the day, we do that more interactive engagement and multimedia presentations. And if families do not have the internet at home, they have computers at home, they place those presentations on CDs, and you could do that for about 20 cents a piece. The world is changing. So all I'm saying is we plug these into Excel, let it do its thing, and then we all go play. This is the world in which we live. We now know in our classrooms that our teachers don't have to be in that particular space. We can bring them in by way of Google+, we can bring them in by way of Skype, we can do some iHookups, we can bring them all. I bring people into my classes from all over the world by way of Skype, and I don't pay anything for them. Great speakers who come into my class. Great encounters. We read a book, we bring the author in, we connect with other students in other parts of the world to come in, and we share those experiences. So we don't always have to have everyone just there in our space, but we can bring them in. And now we're hearing about the emergence of robot teachers. So teachers, if you're worried about your job, robots can come in for about $10,000 a piece. Now you're saying, now sister, you're traveling on delicate ground here. But it's very interesting because I've been observing with some of my colleagues in Japan and in Korea, these robots are only stand about this big. Little kids love them. They come in and they're programmed to teach the basics of any of our courses, and they immediately have face and voice recognition of the students before they walk into the classroom. Well, imagine that. And they can answer the basic questions because they're well programmed. The computer mind works much quicker than ours does. I just simply say mine doesn't work that fast because I've got lots of RAM to work with here. But we need to watch what's happening in this area. And then we look at iPads throughout the curriculum. The Catholic Schools of Tomorrow Award, we had about 200 entries. I would say now a quarter of the schools that entered now are paperless schools. Another quarter said they are moving towards being paperless schools. The other half said, we're going to wait to see if they're going to change. So learning, and we also see learning on demand. It's not just what I create a curriculum for a day, or in a parish I say, today we're going to offer a course in scripture this month, then we're going to do it in liturgy this month, and we're going to do one on Christology another month. Now it's learning on demand because of distance learning. Anyone could learn anytime, any place. It shifts our whole understanding of creating a pastoral plan for a parish, for a diocese, or for our Catholic schools. So teaching online isn't always that easy either if you're a facilitator, because you can get 736 new messages a day. But what else is influencing this whole new civilization is what we're finding in brain research and as related to education. We're talking about neurobiology, we're talking about neuroscience, we're talking about neuroplasticity, where we thought at one time perhaps that the brains we were born with our brains and they grew for a while and then they were sort of stagnant. Now we're finding, putting it in a simple way, that our brains are always being remapped or refocused or redesigned depending upon the kind of stimulation that's coming to them. And what's happening now with the high stimulation of the social media, the high interactivity, where the function of the mind or the brain is being used by our students is shifted. And often we are teaching to children who are using a different part of their brain because of the digital technology. We need to be awakened to that reality. And this kind of change, this shifting, this remapping of the brain requires time. You have to spend several hours a day, 5 days a week, in sharply focused attention as this shifts. And that's what's happening with our young people and those who we had referred to as digital natives. They're with that all the time, 24/7, in their ears, in before them. So we also must be aware of what impact that is. So if you have any doubts, it's called reading. It's how people instill new software into their brain. So thinking new skills or expanding or enhancing by repeated exposure means that these digital natives, this is where they are. But you know, the other fastest growing group of people are those who are over 65. Nobody's laughing here. When my mother had major surgery and a number of years ago, and when she came out of life support, she called the family together, and then she looked at me and she says, there's something that really we have to do, and Anne, you're the only one who could do it. And so my family said, it has to deal with religion. And she says, when I get out of here, I want to have the fastest computer. I want to have one of those cameras on top, and I want to know how to navigate in cyberspace. So that's what we did, and she navigated in cyberspace. And when she was in the nursing home, when we had to go to skilled care, we had to find a place that had wireless because she wanted to take this with her. And then she started teaching those others who were in skilled care, and I think then everybody else was praying my mother wouldn't be around too long. So this I generation is coming with different technical and cognitive skills. How am I doing on time? Okay. Good. I want you folks to know that I gave this presentation in the Diocese of Hamilton to the bishop and his staff in 5 hours. You're getting 35, 40 minutes of it. I hope I'm your visual aid. So, social media literacies is a way of being in the digital civilization. It's not passive learning. We cannot have students come into our catechetical classrooms and sit in a chair, sit in a desk, and open a book. That's not where they are anymore. And it has nothing to do with whether we think that we are not a great catechist. We are great catechists, but the new digital civilization has come upon us, and there's a new human consciousness, and these young people are different. And therefore, we need to teach differently. And therefore, how we teach, whether it's in our catechetical programs, in our Catholic schools, whether it's in adult faith formation, we need to be aware of attention and participation and collaboration and this network awareness and critical assumption and critical reflection. That we are not just passive learners in this new space, we are full learners. So people say, sister, my students say, sister, don't worry, we can handle this, we multitask. However, some of the research I have been reading is you really don't multitask. What you do is you have 10 things going in front of you, and then you close off, you have them all going, but you close off and you focus on this one. And what's happened is that becomes part of the culture of distraction. The inability to focus in depth for any length of time on any given thing. I wonder sometimes, because of multitasking, the concept of multitasking, or the idea that we can spin any place in quick time, we scatter here or there, that we only animate a culture of distraction. So as our brains evolve and as this new culture emerges, we have to ask the question, how alert are we to the alterations of social skills with ourselves and with the emotional context of our gestures? So let me just, what is lost, do I think? I think reflection and critical thinking can easily be lost unless we pay attention here. However, it's happening. So we're familiar with using books. We're comfortable perhaps with books. Young people live in a kaleidoscope world. They look for color. Not only look for color, but they want it simplified. And then they also want it in 140 characters. It's a different world. In India, I just read in the Asian news, the Konkani Bible was just launched as an app, and it has all of these different resources to make the scriptures, enable the scriptures really to come alive. So there is the difference in reading, of how we read. Students read in the sight of thinking of web pages. But then we also think of this. The millennials are testing much better since we changed true and false. So I'm going to skip ahead to just a couple slides so I can wrap up, because I know we've been moving late. But I am entertaining you, aren't I, a little bit? Yeah, okay. Humor me. I always tell my students, just humor me. Just assure me that I'm there. So let me just go on here. So take it all in, folks. See how fast you can read. But how is koinonia, how is community being formed then in this new digital civilization? Through fellowship, through social networking, which traditionally was our being among persons, in writing, through texting and blogs, etc. Our material resources, Google+, websites, Skype, and our convictions are presented through discussion boards, chat rooms, and emails. All of this is contributing to the unity and the diversity within the church today. And we can say that we never did it this way before. We never taught this way before. I was not prepared to go and teach in a grade school, a high school, or a catechetical program, or in the University of Dayton in the way I am asked to teach today. Or not teach, but to create learning ecologies that stimulate the religious imagination of my students so they truly can become acquainted with and respond to the person of Jesus Christ. Various forms of adult faith formation. As Regina had mentioned, our program we're pushing 9,000 students this year. We're going into 40 countries. Our courses are in Spanish. I am now working with the Vicariate of Southern Arabia in Arabic, and with Canada and Africa in French. How else can we reach out to people but speaking and presenting in these various languages? So if you want to express the gospel today, we need to use symbolic language. And we find symbolic language also through various forms of being plugged into the sacred, with many resources that do exist on the internet to help and to support us as we move along. But in the year of faith, we need to arouse in every believer aspiration, conviction, confidence, and hope. How do we change this to this in our schools, in our parishes, in our catechetical programs? How do we, in the spirit of the year of faith, faith is standing with the Lord as to live with him. And the words are so powerful with Benedict XVI when he says, rediscover, reinvigorate, arouse, transform, and witness. Are those not powerful words that should animate us and move us forward? So what is the contribution, in conclusion, of the Catholic education and catechesis? To encounter Jesus in this digital civilization, nurturing a living faith, cultivating a sense of wonder, mystery, and radical discipleship, forming community, being signs of hope, and being aware of this new Catholic theological anthropology. Yes, my brothers and sisters, we are called to release the hidden energy of the good news, to stir into flame with an Emmaus experience, to radiate hope. And the Holy Father has given us so many clues in this direction. And for me, what is Catholic identity? I think without a doubt we look at Jesus and we listen to his words in the Our Father, in the Beatitudes, in his words. We see it in the life of St. Francis of Assisi, and we see it picked up in our Holy Father in his words. I would like to close with a prayer. It is a prayer that I say many times a day. It is the prayer that I say before every single class I teach at the University of Dayton, because this is what Catholic identity means for me. This is how I want to send out my students. This is how I want them to transform the digital civilization. And if you are familiar with this prayer, I ask you to join with me, because I think it reflects who we want to be and become and influence this new digital civilization. And it is St. Francis' prayer of peace. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. And where there is sadness, joy. O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. Amen. Saints from the east, the west, the north, and the south, go forth and set the world afire. Amen. Thank you.
All right, now you can all get your smartphones. Oops, this isn't on. Now it's on. You can all get your smartphones out now and tweet a thank you to Sister Angela. Listen, don't worry about the professional development schedules. They'll be on time. I have just a couple things to recommend to you as you go off. Please think about tomorrow's session around 3:30 to also hear Bill Baker, who's a very fascinating person with a wonderful message to us about leading with kindness. Tomorrow morning's liturgy at 8 o'clock, Father Monsignor Jeremiah McCarthy from our seminary department will be the main celebrant, but it is also to celebrate and thank the pastors who do good work with us. And then as you're walking around, don't forget to go in front of the grand ballroom and see the beautiful art from the students from this archdiocese. Have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.